Okay, can you see it? Can you see it? It's right there. It's right there. Look it. Yeah, it's uh, it's a little bit of skin cancer. It just appeared a couple of weeks ago. Now I don't want anyone to be feeling sorry for me or anything like this. This is a very manageable situation. But it is in the nature of the experience, especially if you've grown up in New Mexico at a mile high, that eventually a pale person is going to have problems. And I have lots of skin problems. Most of them are manageable. This is the first time something like this has manifested itself, but it has to be dealt with. I'm showing you this really primarily to talk about our Torah portion for this week, which is Tazria. We finally get to shift away from the tedium and ickiness of sacrifices and shift our attention to the ickiness of the human body. It's much more intensely personal, and it's also clear in Jewish tradition that the body is a place where holiness happens. I always like to draw attention to the famous prayer, morning prayer that we have, in which we thank God and celebrate our bodily excretions and eliminations. Um, I teach this to kids at Green Family Camp, and I always start out with, here is the blessing, Asher Yatzar, who has created the body with wisdom, and ask them to discuss their favorite things that come out of their body. Is it sneezes? Is it mucus? Is it poop? Is it pee? But each and every one of them serves a function that sustains life and therefore is not to be dismissed or ignored. It's also where holiness happens. And so Tazria, our portion, which is devoted to the status of being tameh, which only last week I translated as icky, but it's even more complex than that, is what we're talking about this particular week. So what's going on in Tazria? Tazria is uniquely concerned with what's coming out of our body, unusual things coming out of our body. The most prominent of which is childbirth, but also any sort of unresolved wounds, uh, suppuration, things that are draining from us. And so Tazria begins by talking about a woman who gives birth to a male child becomes tameh, weird, strange, for 7 days. Now, if she gives birth to a girl child, to use the language of the Gelmans, then that doubles the time because a girl child also is going to be a human being that issues blood from its body in a way that men don't and therefore is weird. Um, then we're going to go on to skin diseases and various afflictions, how to purify yourself in light of these things, the diagnostics and the treatment, and particularly also a focus on our clothing. While our ancestors had no real sense of germ theory or anything like that, they understood that certain contaminants can spread, and therefore cleaning your clothes or disposing of instruments or objects that have been in contact with what is weird, what is icky, what is tameh, usually translated as unclean, those need to be dealt with too. So, first of all, remember that tameh, impurity, does not simply mean dirty. That's not really what it means. Our ancestors were dirty in all kinds of ways. that we don't have to worry about now with baths and showers and running water and indoor plumbing. But rather it concerned some very, very specific things that were associated with the uncanny, the weird, the strange, the things that don't seem to necessarily fall into certain expectations, particularly when it comes to body integrity. And I think that's really the issue. If a body is yielding blood or pus or some kind of leakage, nocturnal emissions, semen in a way that is not normally expected to happen, these things are weird, and therefore they have to be treated as if they are uncanny and dealt with. And so it is the tradition in ancient Israel to if you think you are tameh, and you should definitely consult your local priest on this question, um, then you want to do whatever you need to render yourself tahor, which is usually translated as pure or clean, but I would describe as ordinary. Yeah, going from the weird to the ordinary. So, we could go on and on about this basic system. It really has only limited implications in Judaism today anymore. In the Orthodox world, women who menstruate are required to go to a mikveh. Men will voluntarily go to a mikveh in the Orthodox world if they feel like they've had contact with something that was particularly tameh. But it's generally understood most of the time in contemporary Jewish tradition that we're all tameh. We're all uncanny or weird all the time, which I think is actually emotionally a very appealing message. This idea of being ordinary is much overrated. But in any case, what I'm going to emphasize is not necessarily, for example, the awesomeness and awfulness of childbirth, which is, I think, where most people locate the interesting discussion. I'm simply going to talk about the idea of how we deal with our fear of certain illnesses. Certain things like wounds that won't heal, cancer, certain kinds of neurological diseases frighten us, and rightly so. We can write off as primitive the opinions of our ancestors if they worried about a little leakage from places that don't normally leak. And we can dismiss that. But in fact, the truth of the matter is we're scared and we're frightened by what today we would rather, I don't know, hygienically describe as pathology. Some pathologies, like a cold or the flu, even though it causes us to sneeze and cough and causes mucus to come out of us in a constant stream, we don't really fear that so much. On the other hand, COVID or cancer, these things frighten us even if they don't necessarily manifest all of the icky things that we might imagine. So Leviticus is honest in the portrayal of those conditions that worry us, that frighten us. It offers a process of diagnosis, of acknowledgement, and to a certain extent, because our ancestors didn't have a lot of tools for this, healing also. And what we should take comfort in is the knowledge that, in fact, we have many, many more tools than our ancestors did to deal with the things that frighten us about our body. Does our body always win? Do we always get restored to ordinariness? No. And in fact, we have learned if we're older with many illnesses, there is no complete recovery that can happen. We're always going to have the finger that doesn't completely work, or the discomfort of something that was injured and has never fully healed. And yet, we always have the opportunity for something better in the future. Uh, Even something as simple as pain relief, which was not available to our ancestors, we have in abundance. So let's appreciate the fact that this portion in Leviticus, Tazria, takes on the idea of confronting our illnesses, not being in denial, not pretending that everything is normal, but in fact seeking out help and addressing that. Because in our time, we are blessed with an almost divine knowledge of the human body. And we can appreciate that even sometimes the icky things that are happening to us reveal important things, tell us a lot about ourselves, and point us in the direction for healing. So, short Devar today, but that's my theme, and that's Tazria. So I look forward to talking to you about the leprosy of houses next week. It's every bit as compelling as this.